Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Latin America Perspectives on Law and Religion panel. This panel is going to be in Portuguese and Spanish. So if you need English translation, please grab a headphone and you can listen it in English. Bem-vindos ao painel da América Latina. Perspectiva sobre
Welcome to the Latin America panel about religious freedom. This panel will be presented in English and in Spanish and Portuguese. If you need translation from Spanish to Portuguese, etc., you can hear it in Portuguese.
Bem-vindos ao painel da América Latina.
Bem-vindos ao
Perspectiva sobre o direito e a religião.
Welcome to the panel
Este
for
painel
Latin
vai
America,
ser
and this
apresentado
panel
em
is going to be
português e
presented
espanhol.
in Portuguese
Se
and
você
Spanish.
necessita a tradução de português para espanhol, pode ter tradutor eletrônico. Agora vou cambiar para português. Nós ouviremos nesse painel o Dr. Aloísio Cristovam dos Santos, Júnior, que é juiz titular da Vara do Trabalho,
Júnior, who
TRT,
is
da 5ª Região,
judge for the
Pesquisador
5th region and a researcher in Brazil.
Ouviremos
We will
Silvia
listen Silvia Godoy, assistant
assistente del Procurador General en la Procuraduria General de la República de
General
Honduras. Escucharemos a Víctor,
procurer in Honduras, and Víctor Pino Fuentes,
en la Cámara de
who
Diputados
is
y Diputadas de Chile,
a representative in the Chile's chamber,
Padre Rubén
and
Revello,
Father
director
Rubén
del
Revello,
Instituto
who is the director of the
Bioética
Institute
de la
for
Pontificia
Bioethics
Universidad
of the
Católica Argentina.
Pontificious University of Argentina.
O primeiro
The first
palestrante será o Dr.
speaker
Aloísio.
will be Dr.
Vou fazer
Aloísio,
uma
and
apresentação
I
pouco
will
diferente.
make a
Vou usar
slightly different presentation,
poesia.
and I will use poetry.
Talvez seja pouco
Maybe
difícil
this is
traduzir
going
para
to
o
be a little
inglês,
difficult to translate
mas a
into
beleza das
English, but
palavras
the
poderá
beauty
ser
of the
traduzida,
words
porque
will be
sei que
able
os
to
tradutores são muito
translate
bons.
because our interpreters are very good.
Isso é algo que eu
And
estou
this is
fazendo,
something
não é
that I am doing.
responsabilidade
This is
do
not
Centro de Estudos de Direito e
a
Religião.
responsibility of
Eu
the
espero
Center
que seja
for
algo
Studies
agradável.
and Religion, and I hope this is nice.
Aloísio Cristovam
Aloísio Cristovam dos Santos Júnior,
fez o trabalho na Bahia,
labor judge in
doutor em
Bahia,
Direito, com saber
doctor
profundo, na
in
PUC do Rio Grande,
in
guiando o mundo.
law, guiding the world. He was
Defensor de lei.
an attorney, a
Hoje, na
prosecution
5ª Região,
attorney. Today
ele é o
he
rei.
is in the 5th
Autor de livros em
region.
português
He
e
is the king,
trazendo luz
and he's the
ao
author
tema
that
do
brings light to
Liberdade de
the
expressão e
theme
religião
of
são
laborers.
suas bandeiras de dedicação.
His flags
Com
of
obras que ao direito
dedication
elevam,
with
nos
works
tribunais e nas
that
letras, suas ideias
elevate
se
the
revelam.
law and
No campo
reveal
jurídico,
in
sua voz
the
ressoa,
field.
promovendo
And
justiça. Ele
in the law
ecoa.
field it echoes.
Ouviremos agora
We will
Dr. Aloísio
listen
Santos.
Dr. Aloísio Santos.
Muito obrigado, querido amigo.
Thank you very much, my dear friend Fábio. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. And I would like to say
Gratidão
my gratitude
Centro Internacional de
for this BYU Religion Center
Guaiú,
here
convite para participar
and for the invitation to speak to you today.
no mundo sobre
This is a big reference
liberdade religiosa.
for the whole world about
Enorme
religion freedom.
companhia
So I'm grateful that I can be here
do Fábio Nascimento, que eu já
with
citei,
Dr. Nascimento,
Silvia Godoy,
Dr. Silvia Godoy,
deputado Víctor Fuentes,
the Congressman Fuentes,
meu querido reverendo padre
and
Rubén.
Father Rubén Revello.
Como o tempo é curto,
Since we
vamos
don't have a lot of
começar.
time,
O tema de
let me
nosso
talk.
simpósio é a liberdade religiosa como
The
ferramenta
theme
para
is religion freedom,
compreendendo a pacificação como uma ação
To
de trazer a
pacify
paz
to a place or to end the war in a place. Sometimes we need to use military force, like the Cambridge Dictionary says. This is the idea that we are trying to solve the conflict between the human beings. So this needs to be a tool to pacify. But we need to have to bring the peace, to bring the religion freedom to all of those around us. And this war can happen with many different factors, fighting for land, fighting for ethical beliefs, or for religion. So those are the many reasons that we might have. And the social aspect of these fights might be the same. And you understand in a few minutes why. And sometimes these conflicts started with the differences that we see in different religions, different beliefs. The religion is what the man is looking for, answers for his life. A person that survived in the concentration camp, he said that the human being is to seek for this. Why do we are alive? Why would we have these lives? Sometimes our lives doesn't have any meaning if we one day we are trying to find our existence and we could not find it. And sometimes finding this purpose is part of our personal realization, to recognize, to have a knowledge, or to defend something that in our country. And this goes beyond all of this, but trying to explain to the world around us, we are trying to find the pain and also to the life after this life. And for me, this is one of the main reasons why we have a religion. When in the last century, they were trying to find the answer, but we cannot ignore the construction, this culture of peace that we're trying to accomplish. The religion is very important for many other reasons. Some are very practical. For the human beings that are trying to understand their existence, sometimes we're trying to identify that in the experience that we have in the religion field will bring hope to the life after death, in presenting ways to alleviate suffering and the rules and the laws that we have for morality that are established by society can help us to better understand if we have this religion. And even though many people see this religion in a negative way, we need to find the positive way that can build peace through conversations into humanitarian initiatives that will help the welfare of the human beings. It can help citizens and people around the world. Unfortunately, the religion can be the one that is bringing personal conflicts and even wars against nations. In fact, we cannot ignore the who is right in the religion field. Many wars, religion wars that we have seen in many centuries is an example. And even the United States that has the religion freedom, they saw many conflicts in the past few years due to this religion freedom. Like it happened, well, as we watched the movie, when the people from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints were persecuted and they had to move. And this can contribute to many different factors that happen in the Middle East, for example. And the religion freedom cannot be underestimated. And as a judge, I try to find time to find the religious freedom and observe what is happening around the world. And I try, my eyes are focused on these little events that are happening, causing discrimination in many parts of the world.
As pessoas são diferentes.
People are different. They think in a different way. They have different beliefs. What they see on the day, and these differences are not alone with the people. This is how people react to those differences, especially when they need to find what they need to react. And again, it's not the difference, but the persecution of the worker, because he's different, he is pressure, and his dignity is not being respected. Intolerance is, in fact, the strength that causes all these conflicts. We cannot deny that if we are not treating people equal, and that has always been the same element that causes these conflicts. And there are many reasons why workers are forgetting on the working market. In this, religion freedom sometimes is changed. I can mention here the Native Americans and many different people that have different beliefs because of the. And the peace can only be bring if we honor this religion freedom.
It would be to grant laborers the perspective of creating free zones free of religion, and drive out those beliefs from employees, but that alternative would not be viable in a context of democratic states. I don't believe so. An answer would be similar to the Roman praxis, with the peace imposed by the socioeconomic power for individual freedoms. It does not represent an absence of conflicts and leaves latent when the trigger, the correct trigger comes. For sure, there are situations in which the religious freedoms of the worker may coincide with the corporate interests. Not always, it's always a challenge to find an adequate way for the beliefs and practices, religious practices, would be restricted in a corporate space. At the same time, they contribute for the labor, a decent labor environment, and do not destroy the legitimate aspiration of the employer for efficiency and productivity. However, this will never be solved at the cost of suppression of religious freedom of the worker. Work environments where there is no freedom and the freedom and his dignity are ignored. In the United States, they found a long time ago an adequate response for those conflicts that preserves religious freedom for the laborer and the legitimate aspiration of the employer, including his businesses in accordance to their business goals. It's in Article 7 of Civil Rights. The employer is forced to address the religious freedom things, except when it prevents them from doing business and gaining from the business. And this is a tool for peace. Unfortunately, in Brazil, we don't have a specific law that assigns this duty to the employer. And in our system, it gives margin to a certain uncertainty in law, because every judge judges differently. The laborer that converts to the Adventist church and intended to not labor on Saturdays, he would be subject to the goodwill of the boss, because if he signed the contract, he would have to fulfill that. And if differently, the employee could fire him without rights. And since 2012, I would like to quote my colleague, Jaime Lincard, who is here, and he helped me in this lawsuit. I have defended that since 2012. This can be extracted from the Brazilian Constitution, from a combination of the principle of protection of the worker and the social function and role of the company, and the freedom of expression. And it's inherent to every state that intends to promote the dignity of all its citizens. And for the religious worker, it is his identity. He cannot compartmentalize that and be religious at home, but not at work. And for no different reason, the international documents of human rights proclaim that religious freedom does not comprise only those rights, but to act according to those beliefs. And this thesis that I had about accommodation in Brazil, it was respected by São Paulo's courts, and the employer would want to prevent him or her to use religious collars or other objects at work, and the possibility of this duty to provide accommodation. But that was the first decision of a second-degree court. I can assure that we don't need less religious freedom in the corporate world. We need more of it. It is anti-democratic and may lead to diseases of the religious worker, and this may throw into misery large groups with great consequences for social peace. Religious freedom is essentially the freedom to express religious ideas through actions and discourse. And it is only justified in work when it really hampers the harmony in the work environment. But you don't fight that by suppressing religious freedom. You have to promote dialogue with tolerance, everything that is needed for religion to be manifested in the workplace, and their attendees may feel threatened and do to others what you would like others to do to you. And to finish, any law order is repugnant. The idea that the laborer is placed without legitimate reason, without the liberty to choose and sacrifice his own religious identity and his existence. We cannot lose from sight that the compensation that is received by the employee does not make it legitimate to suppress his religion, as it is written in the International Organization for Work in Versailles, that was also reiterated in Philadelphia. Labor is not just a merchandise, and a worker is not just a cogwheel. It is also a source of identity and personal realization. And the worker is somebody that deserves human rights and needs to be respected in any environment, and especially in the work environment where he seeks his own satisfaction. And I quote a sentence by Mahatma Gandhi, and his quote is, for which religious freedom can contribute a lot. It is an indispensable tool. There is no pathway to peace. Peace is the way. Thank you.
Muito obrigado, doutor Aloísio, pela apresentação.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and we hope that this can touch many decisions in Brazil.
Escucharemos ahora a Silvia Godoy. Silvia Consuelo Godoy Rubio, de Tegucigalpa, su luz ha nacido, en la UNA su título obtenido. Licenciada en ciencias, su camino es sabido. En arbitraje, su saber ha crecido. Hoy en la Procuraduría ha florecido. Asistente del fiscal general, su misión, luchando por justicia en la nación.
Fighting for justice in the nation, consultant in private law. She was also received many accolades. Her passion for the law is her guiding star. In Honduras, her voice is energy. She is an example of reason and strength, defending her country with great heart. Ladies and gentlemen, Silvia Godoy.
Muy buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Nobody had ever dedicated a poem to me. It's a beautiful poem. That is the best way to begin this talk. I would like to begin by giving thanks to this prestigious university for allowing me to participate, to speak of this topic of great transcendence, which is the religious liberty as a tool for the building of peace. As I said before, I am from Honduras, and the entity in my country that defends constitutionally and represents legally the legal interests of the state of Honduras. Within its scope, it participates in all of those things in which the interests of the state can be affected, including the Inter-American Association of Human Rights, that includes the Commission and the Interior Court of Human Rights. I'm going to speak to you from the perspective of the state, and we will speak about this important topic of religious liberty. It is key that we analyze this from two perspectives. The first, the state's position in reaction to the religious phenomenon of society, and the liberty and the right of religious freedom, be it individually or collectively. Secondly, we will analyze the recognition of religious liberty. We will also speak of its development. We cannot say that just participating in a religious act guarantees you religious liberty. And there are many decisions that are vital to the majority of citizens, like marriage, the moral and religious instruction, or the spiritual assistance in public places, which are filled with a religious character that cannot be overlooked. Decisions or acts that these can be denominated as the content that is essential to religious liberty. At the same time, this is what allows us to exercise these given rights. Given all of these things, we must recognize that the right of religious liberty continues to be one of the most precious in the sphere of the right of each citizen. We must realize that this is an absolute reality that is unquestionable. Even though time passes, the conceptualization of Arturo Carlos Gemolo cannot be considered obsolete. As I have said before, we are referring to one of the greatest representatives of this spreading of religious liberty, which defined religious liberty as the first and most fundamental liberty after the right to life. The Constitution of the Republic of my country of 1982 was formed almost 200 years of this constitutional work. In Article 87, it guarantees the free exercise of every religion and belief without favoritism to either or to any, as long as it does not go against law and public order. From this article, we can see that it is not only recognized that there is religious liberty, but we can see that there is the framework of secularism. And what is meant is that no religion should have a stature of privilege one above another. We find ourselves in a spot where each religion is recognized individually, directly, and immediately, both in public square and amongst its citizens. And this avoids discrimination due to religious belief. This constitutional power should be connected with the right that each individual has. And this law is practiced both internally and externally. And at times we will see both positive and negative results. I must mention that in Honduras, and it can't be any other way, the recognition of religious liberty has not been configured as a right that is absolute. And this has not happened yet in public law. In order to be able to give some sense of what I mean, I must tell you some of the restrictions imposed on people by Article 72, saying that the right of each man is limited by the right of other people. The safety of everybody and the just needs of the general public. And also due to democratic development. And we go back to 87. This guarantees the right of meeting and congregating as long as they are not against public order and good living. This is one of the protections to the right of public liberties and a fundamental right. This safeguards security, the health, and all of the elements that form public order within a democratic society. What I mentioned before has been what the Honduran legislature believes to be religious liberty. I must mention the constitutional rights and how we can exercise this. We control conventionalism and also use our justice system to guarantee these rights. The justice system plays a fundamental role in exercising the law. In Article 550, we find the crime of creating obstacles in the exercise of religious liberty and its manifestations. Article 551 shows the offenses against religious sentiments, establishing punishment against those that go against any type of religion or that may desecrate or misuse public squares that may be used by these religious minorities in their religious exercises. Honduras forms part of the American Convention of Human Rights since September 8th, 1977. It recognized the competition and the contention of the court in September of 1981. In this context, Article 16 of the American Convention of Human Rights guarantees the right to gather. We find this in harmony with the universal system of protection of human rights. And the religious liberty or of worship is guaranteed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Universal Pact of Human Rights, and politicians and the Declaration against the elimination against all types of discrimination or restriction of human rights. In conclusion, I must say that religious liberty and freedom of belief has been and continues to be and is in Honduras, in all of the world, a matter of utmost controversy. Nevertheless, we hope that through respect and the strict adherence to the laws that rule religious liberty carried out by the justice and judicial systems, we hope to find solutions that are satisfactory, that put at center stage respect and religious liberty, so that this may be a way that we achieve peace in the middle of a republic that is truly secular and tolerant, sensitive, and in our case, both religiously and not divided or fragmented.
Muchas gracias, Silvia. Honduras tiene una legislación muy buena.
Thank you, Silvia. This is great information on the legislature that protects religious liberties. We love this.
Víctor Pino Fuentes.
Víctor Pino Fuentes.
Víctor Pino Fuentes,
Víctor Pino Fuentes is in Congress. He is a congressman of Chile. He is married with 4 children. His home is his treasure. In his faith and service, he has left great things. Commercial engineer at the service of others, and his leadership is recognized in economy. He is great. And against desertification, he has fought. In his church, a leader with devotion, a bishop, counselor, always in action. From the private to politics he went, and with great work he has accepted his mission. He is a man of honor, serving his people with all of his strength. Now we will hear from Víctor Fuentes.
Estou muito agradecido por estar diante de vocês. A verdade é que quando eu recebi este convite já faz alguns meses, eu fiz todo o possível para estar aqui. Quando estávamos na reunião anterior, fizeram uma pergunta: o que podemos fazer para convencer ao legislador para que entenda que a liberdade religiosa é importante? Eu tenho uma resposta. As senhoras que saibam antes, como eu sei, que a liberdade religiosa é importante. É preciso fazer parte.
Les quiero contar una historia, la historia de mi país.
I have to tell you a story in my country, the last 5 years. In October of the year 2019, we went through a social change that divided our country between the people it divided the people from the political crowd. In that moment, I was with the people. I was not a part of the political world, and therefore I had a very different perspective from what we were going through at that time. What happened? They proposed as a great solution, come up with a new constitution for Chile, a constitution that would be able to guide the destiny of our country from that time forward. Unfortunately, along with this, they also had a great number of social causes that began to destroy everything. They began to destroy churches. They attacked police. And this generated, unfortunately, that we find ourselves in a situation that was very, very complicated. When we began to work towards this, we began to discover that there were movements created
to debilitate religion, not any particular church, but religion, and all of the things that this brings with it, like compassion, love, charity, the brotherhood, in fact. So when we started to see that these institutions were doing everything in their power to be able to eradicate from society many of these virtues that religion, not mattering which one it is that we profess, we needed to defend it. And what is it that happened? In Chile, now we have a union of religious denominations that was formed as a result of this movement. So all of these different religions came together as one in order to talk about this new constitutional process that in one way or another was affecting and extorting what religion was giving us day to day as a society. When we started to recognize what was going on, of which I was part of since I was not a politician yet, some of us decided to become a part of it. Some of us decided to go into politics and become protagonists. Some of us decided to be able to see from the seat of a legislator to see what it is that we could do. I had the blessing, with the help of our Heavenly Father, to be able to make a decision to take this problem by the horns, and thanks to my decisions and the votes of the people, I now became a congressman in the Chilean parliament. I don't have to be convinced by academics or by doctors or by anybody about the blessings of religious liberty, because for more than 30 years I have been of service in my religion. For more than 30 years, I have had positions of leadership within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, who I am eternally grateful for, because they have been formative to me. So for me, it wasn't difficult to see this situation from that perspective. So what is it that happened in Chile? There was a growing hostility that started to create divisions, and it was affecting primarily the youth. And from the youth, with their adolescence, in their making of decisions, and they failed to recognize and distinguish between what was good and what was bad, and they were beginning to have issues and discussions with religious leaders about what was right and wrong, and if religion was a part of something that was wanted by the Chilean people. So I come to you from a perspective that is political. How do we handle this? We had to take a position. We had to approve or deny this new constitution that was brought forth to us in the year 2021. At the time, we were on the line to say if we were going to approve. This was going to happen September 5th of 2022. We voted in this constitution. And you know what? Let me get... For the great majority, more 60% of the Chilean people said that they did not want that constitution, that it was not good for Chile, that it did not allow us to have the liberties that we knew of in Chile. And what it would give us would be a step back, both politically, socially. And so all of these things brought us so that great thinkers, and I must say that I oppose this, they said, given that this didn't work, let's just make another one. And great thinkers of the political realm tried it again. A second constitution, a new process, when the people had said no, that they were not in agreement. So something completely different happened here. We went from being
constitution without offending anybody here. The first constitution was a great, very radical left, and then we went to a second constitution that was a radical right. And so we realized that we had a polarization within our own country. What is it that happened in the year 2023 when we voted this second constitution, this second electoral process? What did Chile say? They said no. No once again, and they once again rejected this second constitutional process that was carried out by the other extreme. And we realized that our country is made of people that are conservative, that are moderate, the people that love what they have, that love their traditions, that love their beliefs, their faith, their doctrines, that love with what they have lived with for more than 200 years since they were a republic. So this did not take us to a third constitution. They finally understood it. They still haven't said that they want to do a third. We hope that this doesn't happen for a long, long time so that we can have peace. So what happened? If in Chile they would have approved this first constitution, today we would be talking about the loss of peace within our communities. For all that are here, Chile is living through a great deal of insecurity, a product of bad policies. But if we had approved the first constitutional process, you can rest assured we would be in a much more precarious situation than in which we find us today, because we would have lost something very important, something fundamental, which is our liberty to be able to live as we desire to live, to be able to worship who we wish to worship, and follow who we consider we should follow. So the question, how can we avoid what almost happened in Chile and other countries? And in my point of view, this is something very simple. We must raise our voices. We must continue to make proposals. We must try to be heard. We must try to get to the hearts and minds of the people. For me, this is fundamental. When we are focusing in being able to sustain religion as a tool that creates peace and edifies hearts and minds, when we can recognize that we must be focused on a common cause, it is beautiful to see different denominations, to see all denominations united, going to speak to the president. It is beautiful to see all of the religions united, going to the rooms of these different constitutional conventions to present and propose as to why it is important that we must stand this ground and not give when it comes to these liberties. It truly gave me power, and it gave me the will to go from the couch in my house to go to the public square, because it allowed me to see that everything I had done in the service of my brothers and sisters within my church, now I can also do it as a congressman in my country in a much greater scope, and doing it with my vision and with my work touching the hearts of many other people. For me, it is a privilege to have been here with you, to be able to tell you a little bit about our recent history. And we hope that we do not fall again into temptation, and that we try a third constitutional process that I do not think would be good for us. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, diputado.
Muito obrigado, deputado Víctor. Muito interessante essa união dessas religiões nesse processo constitucional. Parabéns. Como último palestrante, vamos escutar o padre Rubén Revello. Ele fez uma grande missão como sacerdote em Lomas de Samoa desde 1989. Na Basílica da Sagrada Família, onde sua fé cresceu. Licenciado em Teologia Moral, doutor em Ciências Médicas, especialista em Ciência e Éticas, diretor do Instituto de Bioética e na UCA, formando mentes com sabedoria e paz. Em Roma, Buenos Aires e também a sua voz ressoa em catedrais em muitos lugares, com livros e artigos. Rubén, Revello,
Padre Revello.
Padre Revello, a sua vez.
Bueno, gracias por esta invitación.
Well, I'm grateful for this invitation. This has been a double invitation. We were in Oxford in the meeting that they held there 2 months ago, and now on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean. Imagine if Silvia, who is a young and beautiful woman, if she was surprised by the poem, imagine me, that is a priest, that is old and fat. Nobody had ever dedicated a poem to me, so thank you very much. I want to start with this line, this artistic line, and I'd like to refer to a particular tradition. I wasn't going to make the joke, but I'm going to do it. Every time I start a conference, I remember that in Milan, when they begin to dim the lights, there is a very central voice that says, we ask that the audience please turn off or silence their cell phones. I have never allowed, this has never actually happened within my church. Allow me, we have a bioethics institute, like you heard, and here they also teach moral philosophy within the bioethics. Like, there is a professor that is brilliant who used to tell us what the Greeks did not mention does not exist and will never exist in humanity. And she was right. Every human drama has been perfectly talked about in Greek mythology. Let's talk, what is the myth when it comes to freedom of religion and the state? So immediately, I thought about Antígona. You will know that Antígona had two brothers that were fighting from different thoughts. One, both brothers died, and the brother that dies defending the reigning king is buried with honor. And the brother that dies with the other party, they decide to punish him by not burying him, and that nobody would be able to bury him. Antígona goes during the night. I'm sorry, I am old. Antígona goes during the night, and he buries him. And when this is discovered, she comes before the king and says, judge me. What is better, to continue the laws of the gods or to carry out the laws of the king? She then formed this great uprising. And of course, I'm going to tell you the spoiler. They end up burying her alive. But with an absolute value, she gave up her life, like every martyr, for a value that was transcendental. And I think that this is what we can take from religion, the metaphysical. The concept of a man that goes beyond time and space in order to participate in values that go beyond that, and which is the only absolute, to remind a society of the here and now, to remind them of finality that's transcendental. Religion reminds man who is man, that man is important, that man is not absolute. This is what we remember. In Argentina, we do not have a great deal of problems about religious freedom. Our Constitution, since 1853, defends the right to profess on Argentinian lands, the religion that anybody wishes without interference from the state.
There's a big distinction between the government and religion. Of course, it supports the Catholic Church, but this support, it's like a generic one. Oh yeah, Argentinians, we are mostly Catholics, but it's not a support like a promotion or even advertisement. And the bishops have recently renounced to the last subsidy that they were receiving from the government to be able to, stop that. Like, things have to be clear and distinctive. Also, in the previous government, we had conflicts, mostly regarding gender ideology. The previous government was a leftist one, and that leftist government was trying to impose even to religious schools and colleges and universities to impose the gender teachings and doctrines. And I have a question pending. We have that constitutional objection because they're trying to impose something into everyone, but the institutional objection is not very well respected. It's not very well taken by society. I am not going to argue about that. I would like to complete my presentation. At this moment, there are some shortcuts between the Buenos Aires province, which is still leftist, different when the national government or the government of the city of Buenos Aires, who are more pro-dialogue and they are more respectful to other governmental institutions. If one reviews Argentinian history, it's very easy to find the probable historical causes of this interreligious friendship. And at the beginning of the 19th century, there was a yellow fever epidemic in Argentina, and several people left their downtown houses, colonial homes, and moved to the country homes, weekend homes in the northern area of Buenos Aires. These city homes were abandoned. We're talking about 1850. Coincidentally, when they moved out, the yellow fever stopped, and immigrant waves, European immigrants, started coming to Argentina. So these immigrants started using these big houses as immigrant hotels. What happened? Big homes, successive patios, bedrooms on the sides, and those were the only accommodations that immigrants could afford. Usually families, a Muslim family, a Jewish family, a French family, an Italian family, an English family would come, all from all ways of life. What happened? These places, these immigrant hotels, we call them conventillos. They started to forge like a laboratory, a social laboratory, in which the mothers with their own children and husbands, they lived in their own rooms, bedrooms, but common patios, the playgrounds, that's where the Muslim boy, the Muslim Jew, the Muslim boy, the Jewish boy, and then the Italian boy would play all together. And besides playing, they learned each other's languages. They started building their own language because those languages were very different. Also, their cultures were very different. But there was something that they all shared besides the games. You know what it was? The Eastern candy, Ramadan candy, and Pesach, Jewish Pesach candy. The kids taught their parents that sharing was way more tasteful than fighting. And that's how they started to have that sharing. Maybe they would call the Jewish guy the Russian guy because some of them came from Central Europe, and the Argentinian would put everybody from that area in the same bag, and they would call him the Russian. Or also, they would call Turkish anyone that would come from the Middle East. So you can imagine the Armenian was called Turkish, the Arab was called Turkish, and the Turkish was called Turkish, and the one from Lebanon was called Turkish. They were all Turkish, but there was much love and respect. And the soccer teams in Buenos Aires, there's 15 major soccer teams. Each one owns their own soccer stadium, and at the time they would not ask for the last name. It was way more important. The most important thing was how well they played soccer. They would not ask what their religion was, but the type of person they were. And today we're told this: freedom of religion arises from respect and from knowing the other. It is very hard to oppose someone. Have you watched the movie, The Pajama Boy? It's a concentration camp, and the boss, the chief in the concentration camp, he sees a little kid wearing a pajama, and they became friends. Why? Because when two persons meet each other, and that's more important than their religious backgrounds and their political backgrounds. The way, then, the great contribution that we can all give is, I summarize them in 3 different lines. First, religions make possible. They remind men the metaphysical values, what goes beyond the economical or political convenience. And this is the first thing. We have values that are permanent, that do not change every time. And I apologize in the U.S. saying this is almost heresy, but that's the big difference between the common law, which is the rights of customs, and then the Roman right, which is the natural law. The natural law remains, especially on the major values. It's like a compass. It has, there's one end that sits on the center of the page and the other one moves around. Natural law has a central, fixed point. The covenant and social pact doesn't have where to hold to because it changes, it moves, like following the system. And this is the foundation of one of the biggest shames committed against humanity regarding religious freedom, which are the laws that came from Germany of pure race that was voted through a social pact that understood that at the time, and in that place it was good to marginalize a person because he or she was Jewish or Polish or for being gay or for being a gypsy. Logically, of course, we had the Nuremberg trials, and the judges were called to be judged, and they had to explain why they applied these new laws and what we would today call the humanity lesser right. Second, religions show an anthropologic model in which body, soul, and spirit constitute the identity of the subject. It is as important, the body and the psyche, and also the spirituality of the subject. Because the human being, please recall the Sunnini book, the Homo Religiosus. He says, this was quoted today, the idea is, Homo erectus does not define men because there's other animals that walk in too. The Homo habilis does not define men because there's other animals that use objects. The Homo sapiens does not define man strictly because there's elements that make us think that there's some type of comprehension by animals also. But there's something that animals cannot do. Worship something that is above them, above their perception. Only human beings can do that. What religion does is to remind us of this condition, deeply human condition, based in another human condition, which is empathy. Developing the sensibility, that empathy that makes us human beings. And lastly, and I conclude with this, religions remind men that even though they are the measure for all things, they are not the absolute. Every society, every state, every form of government has an objective referent in the interconfessional dialogue. Those of us who do believe, who are believers, we must recall the first epistle from Peter, who says, give reasons for your faith. Faith is not a feeling. Tango is a feeling. Soccer is a feeling. But faith is knowing. And this requires will, the capacity of calling the other based on the ability of the other to understand, leave our comfort zone, leave our religious language to approach others into a very deep human language. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Padre Revello. Es la primera vez que escucho sobre mitología griega.
This is the first time since I've learned about Greek mythology, metaphysics, theater, and bioethics, and soccer.
Para hablar sobre libertad religiosa.
When it comes when we're talking about religious liberty, very creative. Our time is done now. I am going to close this meeting. Thank you very much to each one of you, especially to the panelists. We now have lunch, and thank you very much. Welcome to the Religious Liberty Symposium.
Vamos a tener nuestra foto.
We're going to take our picture, our official picture.